wallets holding 10 or more Bitcoin, dropping about 11,331 Bitcoin during that time. That's quite a bit. And it did affect the markets instantly as soon as that dump started, with prices going down a little over 11% during that time. But since March 3rd, now about 10 days, we've seen accumulation go back up.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and my guest is Brian from Santiment. And as you all know, we are going to do a deep dive into the metrics around Bitcoin and the top altcoins to get a lay of the land and what's happening in this market after a massive Q4 run-up. And now we are in a corrective phase, and some are saying it's the bear market. But Brian, we're going to use the data to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, good to be here, Tony. It's obviously been a rough couple of months, but at least in the last 2 to 3 days, things are looking a lot more optimistic, especially on a big Friday here.
Yeah, Brian, isn't it fascinating, the dynamic of market sentiment and how it flips? In Q4, it seems like the rally is not going to end, is going to keep going higher. There are crazy price predictions. Everybody's euphoric. But usually when you see that herd, I know we're going to look at the data, when you see the herd get so euphoric, it's time to be bearish. And now that things are in the dumps and the herd is feeling depressed, they're like, it's over, Brian. Now is the time to get greedy again.
Exactly. Yeah, it's amazing how quickly the crowd can flip on a dime, and they've been pretty down for the last couple of weeks. So this was kind of almost a given that we'd see some sort of relief rally to punish all the people selling and selling and selling. Because the retail crowd typically gets it wrong, and the whales and sharks typically get it right because they're the ones pushing prices up and down. So now, on the short term, the only concern is whether the crowd is starting to now, spam Lambos and rocket emojis, and we're back all over the place. So we're hoping that they're not really believing in this rally, because that can aid in the rally continuing.
Yeah, and I think also the backdrop of the macro factors has a lot of people nervous, like tariff wars and recession, and look, the stock market selling off. But that all those things, while they can have an effect on markets, it's not a permanent effect where, oh, the market's just going to keep going down to zero. No, that we've seen, whether it be COVID crash or 2008, markets rebound. As long as people are alive and they have to buy and they have to live, markets will rebound. And whether it's on the micro or the macro, depending on how big the correction is.
It's a good way of looking at it. It's always kind of cyclical. What goes down must come up. What goes up must come down. And we've seen time and time again in crypto where people think that the run is over and crypto is finally gonna die off. And not only does it not die off, it makes a new all-time high within like the next 6 to 12 months after that narrative was formed. So it's amazing what continues to happen.
And I know some people are going to be watching and listening and saying, well, how the hell do I navigate these things? Well, Brian, let's show them. Let's show them the data. Let's start with Bitcoin and what's going on with Bitcoin sentiment and what whales are doing and much more.
For sure. So I'm looking at some of the primary Bitcoin metrics that we like to check out when we do our analysis. Transaction volume is nothing special right now. This is showing the overall USD being traded on chain on a daily basis. So we're kind of hovering anywhere between 10 to about 20 to 25 billion dollars per day. When it was at its highest point in early December, we were seeing like over $60 billion in a few given days here. And that was kind of actually indicating that we were getting toppy. So for those who think that transaction volume needs to go up for Bitcoin to go up, that's not necessarily true. In fact, a decline kind of is reflective of fear, because the retail crowd in particular tends to sit on their hands when prices have this kind of momentum for a long period of time. So nothing too scary there. Active addresses has been up and down. Circulation is up and down. But this is the big one I wanted to check out here. MVRV showing that the average returns, so those traders you're competing with, because they are competitors, their average returns for anyone active in the past 30 days is sitting at around -3%, while those active in the past year, just anyone who's made at least one transfer, their average is at about +1%. So this is actually about as neutral as you'll ever really see things on both the short and long-term basis. The ideal points to buy are something like this on February 28th, when we saw short-term traders down over 15%, long-term traders down almost 5%. You want to buy in when there's blood in the streets, lots of pain going on. And right now, because of the mild bounce we've seen in the last 3 days or so, everything's kind of neutraled out here. And we're right at the point where things can essentially go either way, according to just the raw math of how traders are doing in a zero-sum game.
Yeah. And I saw on the fear and greed index, the sentiment was as low as we saw in March 2020 and even December 2022. People are really scared, Brian. And I think part of it is the macro factors, the backdrop. But, I personally bought the dip on those crashes, not financial advice, of course. And I personally think this is a local top, but I could be wrong because we don't have a crystal ball. But when I saw the sentiment at those levels, I was like, I've seen this story before. I'm buying.
Yeah, there were 3 big points. I'm looking at the past 3 months of sentiment on a given day. So here right before Christmas in late December, we saw 2 really big negative points as prices were declining, and it eventually ended up being a great bounce opportunity. And then more recently, this was when right before Trump announced his strategic reserves, February 27th and 28th, we really bottomed out, got about down to 78K. We had 5 straight days where there were more negative comments than positive, it looks like. And then we see an immediate bounce from that until people start to get overconfident, and then a top forms. And then we go way down once again to that same level, 78K, and we see March 9th and March 10th, huge negative sentiment forming once again. People saying, all right, this crash is for real. Get ready, everybody. See you at 60K, see you at 40K, all these predictions coming out. And then they get punished once again with a nice mild bounce we've seen. But the warning sign here, because we have to be realistic, is the fact that we've now seen a couple days in a row with rising positive sentiment starting to form again. Not quite euphoric, nothing like this that we saw, the week after Trump was inaugurated and people were already pre-celebrating another amazing crypto year we were about to have. We're kind of in this mode where it's leaning bullish according to the crowd. People are starting to attribute this as the dip to buy in hindsight, just because we've jumped about 6K in market value for Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised if this causes a little bit of stagnancy from here. Friday's bounce that we're seeing today is a little bit of just a regression to the mean, where we've had so much blood that it was bound to come up a little. So the people buying now and saying, now it's time to buy, get all that dry powder out from hibernation. It's time to get into Bitcoin and altcoins, etc. Be a little careful of that. I wouldn't necessarily say we're going to see a reversal and now just fall back down again, but ranging could be a likely path based on just sentiment and the fact that like MVRV that we just discussed is like as neutral as it gets right now.
Yeah, that's great insight. So there may be some patience needed before Bitcoin really starts finding some strength, and you could certainly have what they call bull traps, right? Like this rally we're seeing, this small uptick could be a bull trap, or it could be the start of the reversal. We don't know, and so you have to be cautious.
Right. And also to mention, Fridays are the most positive return day of the week. So take that with a grain of salt too, when you see a big outbreak at the end of the week and everyone wants to just have a good bookend to what was otherwise a pretty miserable week. Mm-hmm. Sometimes this happens, but it doesn't mean really anything for the upcoming weeks or months. So just as Tony said, practice patience right now and understand this isn't the signal you were waiting for to suddenly buy with confidence, but it also isn't a signal that, markets are still going down to 60K, 40K, like some of the biggest bears out there are spouting.
Yeah, for sure. So what are the whales doing? Because Brian, I was looking at the sentiment chart and I saw a bit of a dip, but then it started recovering. And I was like, when I saw that dip like about a week and a half ago, I was like, oh no,
Yeah.
is this really the top? What are you seeing from this?
This for sure was a bad stage right here from here to here. So February 20th to March 3rd, we actually saw wallets holding 10 or more Bitcoin dropping about 11,331 Bitcoin during that time. That's quite a bit. And it did affect the markets instantly as soon as that dump started, with prices going down a little over 11% during that time. But since March 3rd, now about 10 days, we've seen accumulation go back up. They've bought back a little more than half of those, 6,131 Bitcoin back into their wallets. So a tale as old as time, whales dump, send prices down, and then start buying back in when, they can get their Bitcoin for 11% cheaper. And that's essentially what we're seeing right now.
Man, I was, like I said, I was breathing a sigh of relief when I saw the recovery because, for my personal bias, I don't want the bull market to be over. I'm looking for higher prices. So I was like, oh man, if these whales are selling, that means something is off here. Then this may be the end. But I want to see more data, a larger sample size. I want to see an actual downtrend. Thankfully, it was just a dip here.
Exactly. Yeah, we were definitely getting worried when we saw them really starting to take profit, but as long as they're moving back up, we can see what has happened just over the past 6 months. Prices do tend to catch up if whales continue to hoard the coins that the retailers are dumping. So good sign.
For sure.
On the supply, go ahead, Tony.
Oh no, I was going to say, because I noticed stablecoin supply is on there. If you could talk about that.
Yeah. So, well, from a whale perspective, we like to look at specifically wallets that hold anywhere between $100,000 to $10 million in stablecoins. This is kind of like that smart money sweet spot. And Tether has been moving up. They bottomed out here around February 15th when they had only about 21% of the overall supply of Tether. Now they're up about 21.6. So that's a pretty decent amount of Tether they've held on to. Or bought back into, but you can still see, compared to the amount of dry powder that they had at the beginning of the rally that started back in mid-October, they do have a lot less. So we'd like to see that pick up a little bit. USD coin definitely is. They hold 27.5% after being as low as 26.5%. So both are moving in the right direction while they're adding more Bitcoin. So that means the money's coming from outside sources like fiat. They're moving bank account money back into crypto at some extent.
Interesting. And then supply and exchanges as far as Bitcoin, how's that looking?
Yeah. So on the Tether and USD coin end, you can clearly see that they have been declining as Bitcoin's supply and exchange is rising. This is actually not the combo we want. We'd like to see Bitcoin continuing to stay off of exchanges, either being flat like we saw in late December, early February, or potentially just continuing to plummet because they're being moved into cold storage for safekeeping from those whales. But yeah, they did start to really move a lot of coins back onto exchanges beginning that first week of February. And roughly 6-7 weeks later, it looks like they've overall, between all the different tiers, whales, fish, dolphins, what have you, there's 35,411 more Bitcoin on exchanges than there were back then. So it's not a ton when you look at it from the perspective of where we were 6 months ago, but we'd like to see this calm down soon because more Bitcoin moving to exchanges, it kind of signals that a lot of people are waiting for their price to hit so they can sell and get out.
Yeah, great point. I've been noticing. I was watching the data this week, and I'm like, oh, I see the uptick. I see the decline with the whales holding Bitcoin 10 or more. And I'm like, it seems like this is the start of something. Are they anticipating another major local top or a market blow up top come later, or I should say come end of Q2? Maybe it's around May or June.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, but the thing that is the elephant in the room is all of the macroeconomic factors that are affecting the S&P 500 right now, and how crypto is still very correlated with the S&P. So not having control, even if you're a big wealthy whale, not having control over what Trump does next, what Musk or Putin or Zelensky does, whatever your opinions are, the uncertainty of where the world stands, the uncertainty of whether, Canada and the US or Australia and the US or China and the US can get along right now because of these tariff wars that are happening. That causes chaos and tends to get bigger capital investors a little more conservative and act safer when they aren't as confident about where the world is going to go next. So I think that explains some of the behavior that we're seeing with the supply and exchanges moving up, and even some of their mild profit taking that they were especially doing in the second half of February.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's certainly, well, I should say there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and I can see why, people who are not looking at data are caught in the whirlwind of that, right? And the emotional roller coaster. But I love going to the data on Santiment and being able to put my emotions to the side and say, okay, what's happening? This is just such insightful information.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'll forward that memo to the devs who are constantly working on ensuring that we've got some relevant data that's easy to digest. And, all this data, if you remember, is on the blockchain. It's not like we have proprietary information that the rest of the world doesn't. What we do is curate it and turn it into something meaningful and easy to evaluate through all these summarized infographics and stuff. So, and then there's the social side, which I'm showing now. And so we can see things like which coins are trending the most, which trending words are popping up across social media the most. And these are the kinds of things that really do impact markets pretty significantly. We can see things like gold trending right now, because when things get bearish for the midterm, like they have been, or at least the sentiments are turning bearish, that's when you see people talking more about getting into safe havens, things that historically never lose their value, even when macroeconomic conditions get pretty dicey. So gold and silver have been talked about a lot more, with people talking about the price levels. Doge is actually referring mostly to the Musk's initiative. I can't remember the abbreviation right now, but it's actually funny that Doge is trending, even though it's mostly due to the Doge that Musk is running.
Interesting. So let's go into some of the top altcoins like Ethereum, and we'll talk about Solana and XRP as well.
Sure. So I'll start with Ethereum. It really has. And I just put an insight out about it yesterday. I'll show you. Will you steer into the ETH fear? Please feel free to hire me if you're interested in these creative rhymes, guys. It took me a long time. But yeah, the crowd sentiment has absolutely plummeted. I did a little infographic. It's maybe a little more busy than I wanted it to look, but you get the idea. This line means there's an equal amount of positive versus negative comments. This is 1.5 to 1. This is 2 to 1 positive to negative, and this is 3 to 1. So you definitely don't want to see sentiment way up here. This is where you tend to see tops and prices go down. Here, it's still a little bit too bullish most of the time. Here, it's actually pretty neutral. So like a resting state for social media is usually like 1.5 to 1 for most of the top comments or top social media platforms toward Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, etc. So when you see it start to go below there, that's when you know that the crowd is genuinely starting to get super scared and expressing a lot of FUD. And as you would imagine, with the year that Ethereum has seen, there's a massive amount of bearishness that's really starting to form here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight days where we're below this line, meaning there's actually more negative comments overall across social media than positive right now. And that's actually a good thing. So it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, Ethereum's done. It's underperformed compared to XRP and Cardano and Doge and Bitcoin. That's actually a good sign, especially when it's combined with the fact that the crowd has written it off, because this means that whales and sharks can easily hoard more coins, which they are to an extent. It looks better than Bitcoin. And then they can pump up prices once Bitcoin starts to recover and allow the rest of the markets to do its thing. So I kind of like this a lot right now. It doesn't necessarily automatically mean Ethereum is on the brink of taking off, but from a mid or long-term perspective, this is a great sign. The fact that, just seeing these yellow bars declining over time the way they have, it's pretty clear that the crowd is just done. They're done with Ethereum. They believe it's a disappointment, and XRP and maybe even Solana will pass it soon in market cap, which would be a huge milestone. Ethereum's been in the number 2 spot for almost a decade now. So it's crazy.
Yeah. And, I mentioned earlier, I bought the dip. I specifically bought some ETH, SWI and XRP, just buying those lows, right? And obviously I'm diversified, but I saw ETH as a big opportunity because it's just so down and the sentiment is so bad. And I'm like I said, I've seen this story before, and I put the majority of my funds, my dry powder, in ETH when buying that dip.
Totally. I don't blame you at all. And I hope it ends up being a good decision for you. But based on the data, I mean, it seems pretty logical that there will be some regression to the mean eventually, not just because it's underperformed price-wise, and prices tend to rubber band against each other, but if it's underperformed and the crowd is just giving up on it, that's a pretty good combination.
For sure. So let's look at Solana and how that's been doing. I know the meme coins that are, specifically on Solana that has been really hyped up with Pump Not Fun. A lot of that market has died down. So how has that affected Solana?
Yeah. So from a discussion standpoint, they're pretty much at their lowest point since pre-Trump election. They really have seen a steep fall off from a price perspective. We went down, man, more than I thought. It's down somewhere between 47 to 50% since its high back on right before Trump's inauguration. So the discussion rate is in the toilet. There's just very little discussion compared to other altcoins right now. And then from a sentiment, just overall like positive versus negative sentiment perspective, I'd be surprised if it's not bearish right now. It's definitely bearish. So look at this, just compared to where things were at like late December, early to mid-January. Interestingly here, I found this odd that the huge surge that happened on the 18th and 19th resulted in very bearish discussion. If I remember, there were some weird network issues though happening at that time. So it might have been kind of skewed due to people having trouble with transactions. Solana, sorry for the Solana fans, but they do have some network issues famously from time to time that other altcoins have not. Maybe over the long term, that'll hash itself out, but that does impact sentiment a lot for Solana. Either way, right now, it looks like people are pretty low on it compared to other altcoins. You can see pretty visually here how things have declined in positive versus negative comments.
Yeah, and then there's been a lot of controversy, of course, around meme coins and Pump.Fun, which are Solana based. So I think with that aspect of the market drying up, it's probably affecting Solana. Not entirely, obviously, because you got the entire market sentiment down, but a lot of Solana's utility was coming from meme coins over the past year.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And I was just checking out the overall mentions of Solana meme coins over the past 3 months here. It looks like things have really cooled off in discussions. So despite there being controversies, it's mostly just resulting in people not wanting to talk about it much at all. Meme coins in general, as we've talked about in previous episodes, Tony, they're just kind of being abandoned at the moment because people are so scared of losing another, 20% in a given day.
Yeah, and then, there was that big, I think, was it Javier Milei, president of Argentina, and what happened there? That was a pretty bad one. So look, I know I'm a bit biased. I don't believe in meme coins, although I believe in people's freedom to invest in what they want. But I'm not a fan of meme coins. But obviously, there needs to be some control where the law enforcement needs to act on people who are creating rug pulls. There are legit meme coins out there that have a community, a brand, Doge, and so forth. But the ones that were started last night or last week, those are the ones I'm more against.
Yeah, I think you're like me, Tony, where the more you can actually analyze a coin and have some predictability to it, the better the investment is. And the thing with meme coins is they're literally a lottery. You're betting on how other people are going to perceive the coin that you're investing in. So when you don't have that power to look at things like development activity, because there really isn't development activity when it comes to meme coins, and there's unpredictable on-chain activity, and there's such a centralized proportion of the coins being held by the founders. It's just it makes it a bit of a luck factor that I think for people who've been in crypto a long time, it tends to make them pretty uncomfortable if it's all about luck and there's no edge or ability to analyze to an extent where things are going to go next.
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely how I feel. All right, let's wrap it up with XRP and what you're seeing there on multiple fronts.
Yeah, so XRP should look a little bit better because it's actually held up pretty well. So just like other altcoins, I mean, it's definitely dropped from its high on the 16th or so. It's down about 29%, not nearly as much as the 50% Solana's down. It had its big run-ups right after Trump's election mainly. I think that was mainly due to the SEC turnover. And out of all the top caps you can think of, XRP is the one that's had the most roller coaster ride with the SEC. So when they hear that Gensler is going to be out of office, an asset like XRP is going to get a lot more money poured into it. So that's exactly what happened. But obviously over the last couple of months, it's turned down just like everything else. Active addresses, though, is interesting. There's been a sudden influx, and I wish I knew what this was related to, but pretty much 2 weeks ago from today, we started to see address activity go from like maybe 59,000 active addresses per day to now, at least over the last 7 days, 180,000. So it's tripled during that time. That's huge. It doesn't necessarily automatically signal bullishness, but it means that the utility of XRP is just surging right now. From an MVRV perspective, short-term wise, there's some meat on the bone for a little more rise because traders are down about 5%. But long-term, because it had such a huge end of 2024, average traders are still up about 38%. That scares me a little bit. You can see even back here, it was off the axis where average traders were up like 150, 200% on average. These are just like comically high numbers, which signaled we were bound to see a top around here and even here. Anytime it's in like over 100% returns for just any address that's been active on average, that's a little terrifying. But it's at least calmed down a little. I'd like to see, maybe sub 20% long-term MVRV as a good signal you can buy in or add on with confidence. it still looks a little overheated on the long term, but obviously there's, real world factors with the SEC at play that can, or like an ETF being announced later this summer. That's something a lot of people are anticipating, and that can just change everything and throw a lot of these metrics out the window.
Yeah, it's a great point, because it's exactly what you're saying. There's such a huge connection between Ripple and the SEC, and that anything that the SEC does in favor of crypto kind of automatically pushes this bullish sentiment towards Ripple and XRP, because it's just such this long-standing thing. It's like its own meme, so to speak.
Yeah.
Everybody's aware of it, and the SEC's been dropping cases. And then new SEC chairs coming in. Then you have all these XRP spot ETF applications being filed. So there's like this strong correlation with sentiment there.
Exactly. I just saw yesterday on X, there was one of the featured headlines on that right panel was like, SEC and XRP lawsuit finally may be coming to a conclusion. And I was like, didn't that already happen? Like, I can't even keep track of the saga. I'm sure the people who are heavily invested in XRP know a lot more about it, and they might be rolling their eyes at what I'm saying. But for people who just follow all coins versus just one particular coin, it's actually really difficult to keep up sometimes with all these developments, because I know that the lawsuit happened almost 2 years ago now. There was an appeal. The appeal never really got to the table. And now the SEC's it kind of picked and chose at a few other things with XRP. And then I guess where we're at now is that's coming to an end now too. So XRP and its large community may finally be able to breathe and just focus on, the innovation and improvement of its asset, just like every other altcoin.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are waiting in anticipation. I think the final thing is just that resolution. There's the $125 million fine, but there's reports that Ripple may be pushing back on that, given that the SEC's taking a different stance overall to the crypto market. And I personally have the theory that they may be waiting for the new chair, Paul Atkins, to come in to resolve some of these more complex things. But the point is the market and the community and so forth are looking. I think people are looking at it positively. Like, this is going to resolve. We know, because we're under the most pro crypto regime, and the SEC's changed their stance. No more Gensler, and hopefully there's some resolution soon.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. You know more about it than me, but hopefully there's a resolution. And I was just checking out like the 1 million or more holders. So this is, people with XRP at about $2.30. This is anyone with about $2.3 million or more. Consider them sharks and whales. They hold about 73.86% of the supply and about 46.42 billion XRP. The overall supply is going up, but the percentage of supply is stringing down just a little bit. We'd like to see that start to move positive soon. In fact, there's definitely some correlation with the price. Just want to show you this. So I'll just hide the overall amount. From a percentage standpoint, yeah, you can see they really took a lot of profit beginning in early December, right at this top when it got to like 284. And even during this higher high, they were already kind of taking profit, which is interesting to me. Even back here, you can see they were accumulating as price was going down, and then they really started to take profit again after that rise. I know this looks small, but this was still a pretty big percentage gain back here. So I'd still like to see the smart money moving in the positive direction again, but it's just one element to many different analytic perspectives we can look at.
This is such great insight, Brian. That's why I love Santiment's platform and being able to go through it, because like I said earlier, with the turmoil of the markets, and we're all human, so we feel the emotional impact of price movements, and to go to the data and say, okay, this is what's happening, and filter out the noise and all that is really great. So hopefully when we meet in another 2 weeks, things are in a much better spot and Bitcoin is finding some strength and moving up.
Here's hoping, man. Looking forward to the next talk.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.